everybody? It is Sunday Live every Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Here we are, Spiritual Direction and Soul Care. We get together every Sunday at 2 p.m. and we grow, we heal, we do all the things. We just finished last week. We finished our 12-week journey into forgiveness. It was awesome. And today we're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to talk a little bit more about some other things on Sunday Live. But before we do that, as always, come over and join our growing community at Facebook. We have a private Facebook group there. There's always a lot of other content there, ways to interact with other members in Spiritual Direction and Soul Care, and check out our website, Spiritual Direction and soulcare.com. It's a mouthful, I know, but you can learn there about our soul care program and other things you can give to support the work. It is awesome. So today I thought we would dive right in. Today because today's kind of a special Sunday Live. Today we're talking a little bit about the shadow and authenticity and vulnerability and what all that is as we go together, and doing something a little different today. I'm just kind of sharing kind of thoughts from my head as well as from my heart today. As many of you know, this weekend we did the final interment of my dad. My dad died back in March. And so we brought him home to his plot, his grave, and we celebrated his life yesterday and buried him yesterday, and had tons of family in from all around. It's been pretty awesome to see all this extended family get together, and everyone, like people from one side of the family exchanging emails and texts and phone numbers with other sides of the family, people who aren't even really related, but all love Dad and we're all connected. It's been awesome to hear stories about Dad. It's been awesome to see the ways that he's impacted people's lives. But I also thought it would be a good time after all that this weekend to just also kind of talk about the ways this whole experience is really a window for us to think about how we think about ourselves and how we live our lives. In retrospect, after someone passes, there's all these memories and there's all these stories to hear. And then out of that becomes a lot of realizations. I'm getting notes saying that some of you are breaking in and out. So I hope you're okay. I've told kids to get off tech here and to not be using the internet here. So hopefully it'll be okay and it will heal up for you wherever you are on your device, if that's your deal. So I was saying, wanted to think about just like how these things kind of give some realizations for who a person is and who a person was. And some of those realizations about Dad got me really thinking about that work for ourselves, as we go through life and move and go forward after this. Sometimes the loss of a person really helps us push pause to think about where we are. Sometimes loss in general helps us come to a better understanding of ourselves. So if some of you might be wondering, that's my cousin dog over there. That's Maggie. She belongs to my uncle and my aunt, and she's like a total sweetheart. Hi, Maggie. She just hangs out. She's, she's sweet. Anyway, so thinking about what that means, thinking about all that means, what authentic living means, what being vulnerable about who we really are is, and there's nothing like loss to help you feel vulnerable, and it just made me really think about how grateful I was for my dad, who was a real guy. He was just really honest. He was who he was. He was strong enough to be tender and open and vulnerable about who he was. I wonder if you have people like that in your life. I know it's a real example to me. I want to be that kind of person. But one of the things that we were talking about was talking about how when my dad volunteered and signed up for the Coast Guard when he was 17, and he came home and he told his mom, and his mom was so mad she didn't talk to him for 3 weeks. And And he went off to the Coast Guard, and we were talking this morning at breakfast with his brothers and his sister and some family about how that experience of doing a stint in the Coast Guard was really important for him to find a sense of himself, to find a sense of his own voice and who he really was, apart from all the received systems and stories that was telling him who he was, which is what families are, right? Like, families are important, but they're also a story system. Families are a story system that can sometimes assign a mix of accurate and inaccurate, helpful and unhelpful understandings of ourselves. Are you picking up what I'm putting down here? Anybody feel this? And so, like, stepping out and doing that journey through the Coast Guard was one of the places where he was able to kind of discover who he was apart from those familiar spaces, and so it got me thinking even more as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about this weekend on Sunday Live and how it connects. I just kind of intuitively thought, that's something that we all need to, like, push into and think about, to help us better understand ourselves and to help us better understand how we're growing and who we are, so, and in kind of like the spiritual growth world, that's called doing shadow work, that's called looking at our shadow. That's the unseen, right? The stuff behind the scenes, the stuff behind how we publicly face out to people and how we publicly face to ourselves, right? And so shadow work is really looking at the meaning behind kind of like the emotions that rise in us, the unconsciously rise in us, right? Our responses, like the actions that we take in different situations or have taken in different situations. Doing shadow work is looking at every impulse, every repressed emotion, right? Maybe you're raised, you've heard me say stuff like this before. Maybe you're raised in a house where nobody's feelings mattered except for the one person, like one parent's feelings only mattered, or only one sibling's feelings only mattered, right? So everybody kind of like self-regulated to stay out of way, So shadow work is like exploring that and looking into those things. It's looking fearlessly at everything you typically feel ashamed to feel, right? And so that can seem scary, and that can seem like, oh, we're dealing with dark stuff. But actually, shadow work is also doing introspection about good emotions and good responses, because even some of the good stuff that we do, we don't fully understand or appreciate why a lot of times things are important to us the way they are, or where the good or positive or gifts that we have are coming from, right? Like, we just kind of don't understand ourselves very time, right? So there's a shadow behind everything. So shadow a lot of times sounds creepy, like the old radio drama, The Shadow. I think they even made a movie with Alec Baldwin called The Shadow. Like, it sounds creepy and ominous and foreboding, but shadow work is just digging below the surface and really getting into really doing that intentionally. And sometimes we have life circumstances, like my dad going to the Coast Guard, that help get you into a different space so you can step and look at yourself a little more clearly, right? And so even that is a kind of shadow work. It's doing the things that we look at behind what we're doing, how we're feeling, what we're thinking, where we're going, right? Even the stuff we think is good, right? So it doesn't always have to be heavy. Like after this weekend, I'm not really interested in heavy, but I am, because I'm kind of emotionally exhausted. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in heavy, but I am interested in deep. I'm always interested in deep. I'm always interested in healing. I hope you are. I think that's a value in spiritual direction and soul care, is like, we are always ready to do healing work, right? Do that deeper work, right? So like, that's the thing too. Like, we're always so prone to being negative, right? So then we think about shadow work as heavy and hard and, all this stuff, right? But sometimes the surface level shadow work is just asking yourself, why am I such a perfectionist about this thing? Because I know a lot of people who are not perfectionists, but they have their thing. Like, in fact, put this in the chat, even on the replay, put this on the chat. What's your thing, right? Like, what's a thing that you have, right? Like, I know for me, one of my things that just makes you go about, right? One of my things is finding random dirty socks through our house. It's like so much so that it's a joke in our family, right? So random dirty socks, or when I find LaCroix cans with only 3 sips taken out and then sitting there lukewarm and it's wasted water, like sparkling water, right? Like when I find that in different places, I just like lose my mind. I'm kind of a perfectionist about those things. So I'm not a perfectionist about everything, right? But like some really easy shadow work for me to like really understand who I authentically am and to be kind of vulnerable with myself, because that's really what shadow work is to discover your authentic self, your true self, and to be vulnerable and open about it with yourself and others. You know, we don't have to apologize for who our true selves are ever. If you want to take anything away from this today, you don't ever have to apologize for who you really are. And it's like, but like some easy shadow work for me is like, why does random dirty socks in different random places, like literally like weird places, you guys, I could go on for hours about it, but like, I won't subject you to it. But like, why does that set me off? Why am I such a perfectionist about that? You know what I mean? Like, why do I get so annoyed about that stuff? Right. That's a really easy way in to kind of go, I wonder what that's about. Instead of being judgmental and like, oh, this is heavy, but be like, oh, I wonder why that's a thing for me. I wonder why that's a thing. Be curious about yourself. Right. Betsy says, this week I yelled at Daniel about the orientation of the spoons inside the dishwasher. That's getting pretty granular, sister. Not just the way you load the dish, but the orientation of the spoons. Like, is it spoon surface up or handle up, right? I may have uttered the phrase, this is unacceptable. I love my friends. This is unacceptable. I can see being mad. I can see being mad about knives, sharp knives, not going in blade down, but spoons, that's next level, girl. I love it. I love you guys. This is hilarious. Oh my gosh. All right, Mark's in here. Everybody's jumping in now. Okay. Mark says, my things include kids getting a new glass of water and placing it next to the glass they got an hour ago. Oh my gosh, I'm constantly washing dishes. Yes. Mark says, orientation in dishwasher matters. Don't encourage it. Betsy, shadow work. Yeah. Oh my gosh. If Daniel's around, he needs to weigh in on here too. I'd love to hear what he said about that conversation, because I'm sure it helped open him up to some of his own shadow. Some of that might be dark shadow work. Like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. You guys are awesome. Anybody else throw something in? What's your thing? What's the thing that drives you nuts? Like, why is that? That's an easy way into shadow work, right? And just be like, why is that for me? That's who I am. That's who I am. That's how it is. You know what I mean? Sometimes, shadow work too is like digging deeper into why emotional intimacy and attention in relationship, is so important to you, right? It doesn't always have to be like this, like search or quest to figure out your toxic traits, right? Shadow work can be inquiry always into good things too. I've said this before, but I want to really emphasize this. Like, shadow work is just getting behind stuff so that you can understand yourself better, so you can fully be who you are, and so that you can offer your vulnerable self to the people who love you and that you love, right? Offer nothing less and nothing more than your vulnerable self. Henry Nouwen, right? Henry Nouwen, the great pastoral theologian and psychologist, right? He said that the ministers and the soul healers and the healers of the wounded in the future of the 21st century will be people who simply offer nothing else except for their vulnerable selves. And see, like, when we offer our vulnerable selves to each other, right? When we do this shadow work, there's blessing for others, right? There's benefit for others, because when we do our shadow work, which is lifelong work, right? The more authentic we become, then the more clear and stable we become, the more honest we become, and the more confident, I believe, ultimately you become to just simply offer unapologetically your vulnerable self as you are, right? And the people who can take it, then great. Then they can take it. And the people who can't handle it or judge it, well, then they're not for you anymore, or they're not for you in that season yet. You know what I mean? It's okay. And without judgment or anger, you can do your thing, right? So it's always to reveal unconscious behaviors, right? And to reveal your real core beliefs that inform who you are today, right? the real beliefs, not your conscious beliefs that you say, I believe this, that you're saying because you have to assure other people that you hold their values, right? Like that's what Jean-Paul Sartre calls yes, I totally did French accent. Yes, Jean-Paul Sartre, the existential French philosopher. He called living like that when we say we have certain values or act like we've assumed certain values, but they aren't really our values. They're values that we've taken up out of social pressure to keep our social group, right? Or to remain respectable or whatever, right? He calls that bad faith. He calls that bad faith living or inauthentic living, right? It's where we cave to social pressures, whether it's the social pressure of the system of your family, of your church, of your workplace, of the neighbor, whatever, right? And we take up false values, right? And we disown ourselves from the innate freedom that is given to us, that the freedom to be ourselves, the freedom to be fully ourselves, the freedom to walk as that which is made in the image of God, a co-creator and healing presence in the world, unique and unrepeatable, each one of us, right? Like when we betray that for the sake of social pressure, right? Then what we do is we start practicing how to we're practicing avoiding our shadows, and we're practicing bumping up against against other people's shadows, right? But relational cultural theory, which is used by a lot of therapists and is like basically has really become kind of like one of my main frameworks for understanding human development, right? Says that you can't do that you actually only grow. There is no destination. There's only constant growth that rises out of action in relation to others. See, growth happens always. Human development actually happens out of the action that rises in relation to others. So we need each other. You need me dealing with my shadow work, and I need you dealing with your shadow work, right? Intermingling and getting in step with each other, and sometimes conflicting or crossing, right? For us to actually fully keep growing as human beings, right? And this is really, really important, right? And where we end up seeing damage and inauthentic living, where we see people closing down because they're not safe to be vulnerable, is when there are people finally getting onto their shadow work, but there's all these other people who won't do it because the religion says not to, the church says not to, the social respectability of the social group you're in keeps you from that, whatever it is, right? Are you kind of picking up what I'm putting down here? I'm gonna, okay, there's more comments about the thing, right? You guys are being honest about your shadow work. Mark says, my kids putting dirty clothes back in their drawers with clean clothes, and then they complain they don't have any clean clothes to wear. Yes, children are a gift because they surface our shadow stuff all the time, right? That is so funny. That is so funny. Mark says, I need to order in my physical space because continual disorder in my physical space adds to the disorder in my inner world. Shadow work. Yes. Anybody else out there? What are you guys thinking about what I'm saying about shadow work, right? Like, shadow work is positive. Let me kind of sum up if I can remember. Like, shadow work is positive work too. It's not just dark, heavy work, right? It's not just looking at toxic stuff. It's not just saying I'm defensive in these situations because I was made fun of publicly in front of my class in third grade. And so when these kinds of things come up, it still triggers me and I'm 54 or whatever, right? Or something like that. Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's not just the negative. Shadow work is positive, right? Like, these things give me joy. So let's talk to me about what gives you joy. Please, I need this. Maybe this Sunday Live is more for me than anybody else, but I love this community and y'all have wisdom. Tell me what gives you joy, because like shadow work is also saying, this gives me joy. I experience pleasure in these situations, right? Like, there's nothing better than this in my life. Well, why is that? That's shadow work. That's That's positive shadow work. See, it's digging deeper into what's going on to reveal unconscious behaviors and core beliefs that inform who you are, right? It's this introspection. So what do you love, right? Like, what's good? And do you understand, right? Like, y'all know, some of y'all who know me in real life, you know that I love food, right? Like, I love the most perfect, amazing food, right? The pleasure and delight and the craft of food. I love to cook for people that I love. I love the way food brings people together around the experience of sustenance and food, right? There's nothing better to me. There's nothing better to me than an amazing meal with amazing people having amazing conversation, right? There's nothing better. Some of you have done this with me, right? Some of you have had the privilege, the privilege of going to an excellent restaurant and having a long, leisurely dinner with me. And the conversation and the joy of the food, it's a thing for me, right? And I know some of y'all have been caught up in it, right? Because it's a thing for you. Well, why is that? What's the shadow work here? I'm going to do some honest shadow work here. I think some of it is because I'm growing to realize that, like, it really matters to me that everybody feels cared for and connected. Cared for and connected. And not just in an emotional way, but in a whole person sort of way, right? Like, human beings are these unrepeatable, miraculous gifts. Did you know that about yourself? You're an unrepeatable, miraculous gift. And so, like, when we sit down and we eat and delight in food and delight in the fuel that gives us the energy to go out and be what it is we are in all our deliciousness, yes? And all our awesomeness, yes? It's amazing to sit down and to, in conversation over that food, it just kind of like, food just kind of takes all the barriers down. It helps everybody kind of lay their weapons down. And you know this is true because you know it's terrible when you have a dinner or you're eating with your family and everybody's mad at each other and barely anybody can look at each other. You know the inverse proves what I'm saying, right? Because food, when it drops, right? When it drops, it helps drop our defenses and we start opening up and having conversation, right? You see the person fully. You see the person fully and you feel more free to say the things that you say and think, right? And it's like that helps people feel not only cared for, but then deeply connected in their whole person, right? Not just, oh, I love you, but like the conversations, the giving and taking, the sharing. This is why that matters to me. See, that's good shadow work, to know myself and why I do this, right? And that's an easy one because I probably have already done that, right? You know what I mean? Alexa says, I love good food too. Amen. Amen. Yes. Good food with good people with great conversation. Betsy says, I love cheap old houses, pocket doors, butler's pantries. Oh my gosh, butler's pantries. Hardwared floors. Love rescuing and repairing old things and appreciating the beauty of went before. Probably something to do with mortality and wanting to feel connected to the larger flow of time, not losing things in the ephemerality of existence. Oh, that's rich, you guys. That's rich. That is rich. Mark, what do you mean by the prophetic shadow work? I don't know what that means, but say more maybe about that. Yeah, like what do these things are? Why do these things resonate with us, right? Why do we love stuff like that, right? Like, why, what is it? Like, Jill, my wife, Jill, she thinks she'll say that I don't think there's anything better than watching a dog run around in circles in a yard or in delight, right? The sheer unbridled joy of a dog, you know, like, why is that? What is that? What does that say about your deepest core values? What does that say about your unconscious behaviors and what you really value and who you really, really are, right? See, so much of shadow work requires looking inward, right? And it requires maybe journaling. Some of us journal, right? Or looking at what we might think are seemingly surface or petty problems, right? Or issues as well as feelings. But it's about analyzing them so that we can understand the exact reason you react in the way you do. And let me be really clear. You do this, it will serve other people, but don't do this work so other people understand you, right? You know what I mean? Oh, somebody's here. Good. Like, don't do this work to for the sake of other people because you feel obligated to other people, right? Like, do it for yourself, right? And maybe some of your shadow work is, oh, I do that shadow work because I just really need other people to understand me. Well, then there's your real shadow work, right? Why do you need people to understand you so badly, right? Why does feeling good about yourself, why do you give that power to feel good about yourself and who you are to the approval of other people, right? Like, and I'm not saying helping people that we love understand each other and come to deeper understanding is wrong, right? Like Thich Nhat Hanh says that like understanding really is the core of love, right? So I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is a lot of times that obsessive impulse that says, I need you to understand, I got to be understood, and I can't handle it if you don't understand, because behind that understand a lot of times is approve, right? If you would just understand, then you would love me. If I felt like you understood me, then you would actually approve of me and therefore love me. Well, why are you building your life built on the approval of others, right? That's the real shadow work, right? So don't do shadow work to understand yourself for the sake of giving then you the power and your freedom away again, because then that's bad faith. That's inauthentic living again, right? Because you're going to always check yourself. You're always going to like modify that work when you present to others, because you're always going to be driven by fear, right? Of other people's okayness with you, right? And I'm not interested in giving people, my power that way, right? I don't think you should either, right? Shadow work is also recognizing, that like something like, this is an example, right? Shadow work is recognizing that like maybe when you get frustrated with a friend or a partner for taking too long to text back to you, right? That's not an issue that they need to fix, but it's probably a sign that you have an unhealthy attachment style that you might need to fix, So shadow work is recognizing that when people are draining your energy with their needs, it shows you that you have a need for maybe a stronger boundary within yourself, right? Within yourself, right? So shadow work is recognizing that the world is just a mirror. It's a mirror. Shadow work is recognizing that life doesn't just happen. And it's recognizing that every action or non-action that you take results in either a healthy or unhealthy response from the world, right? So shadow work asks, what does this mean about me? What does this, whatever this is, what does this mean about me on a deeper level, right? What does this mean about me on a deeper level? Mark says prophetic shadow work, as in that's a word, like forthtelling, speaking prophetically into someone's life, seems like it could be connected to how we do our own shadow work. I don't know. It just seems like, yes. Yeah, it is about that moment. Because I think like when we've had conversations, or when you're in a conversation with someone where someone's really dropping like truth, where you feel seen and heard and you resonate deeply and you go, that's a word. That's a whole word for me today, right? That is shadow work, right? That's like helping. That's the person being a mirror with you, because sometimes shadow work is done with others, right? Like it's this weird thing, like I've said, like you don't want to give power to other people and you have to guide your shadow work, but there are people who you love and trust who can sometimes step into that process for a moment with you, and they'll say, hey, but you're really like and you need to hear it, because you need to be reminded you're not crazy. You need to be reminded that you're loved and valued for something that is truly a strength or a reality about who you are, right? You need to know that you're seen, right? Yeah. So there's definitely a give and take in this. I really, really like this. Mark says, I'm on pain meds, so don't judge me. We ain't judging you. We are a judgment-free zone. I'm not interested in judging. But so do you see all this stuff? Like I think of my dad, and I think of the way his journey into the Coast Guard helped him find his voice, right? Find his voice, and to be able to be really clear. My dad was a sweet and tender guy, but my dad also did not countenance injustice. He did not countenance what he thought was ridiculous, or weirdly controlling stuff. He did not like that. I have stories about that. And a lot of people who prioritized controlling other people didn't like it when my dad would like react and say, that's weird. Why are you telling people what to do about that? That's none of your business. You know what I mean? Like my dad had that in him, right? And he would say he would react poorly to that, right? And I think that rightly so, right? But he didn't find that until he got out of his home and did his own journey, right? And found that he could use his voice. Even within the structures of something like a military branch like the Coast Guard, right? Like when he was serving here, because I'm up in our place in Ludington on the west side of the state, Michigan, like when he was serving in Coast Guard here, this is where he met my mom. And he was the lowest ranking non-commissioned officer on the boat. And he would always say about the Coast Guard, he would always say, it's silly little men in silly little boats going and pulling silly people out of the water. And so he had a few bad experiences where he had to go out with the boat and be with a crew and pick up floaters out of the water. People had drowned, and he had terrible experiences with that. And it was within the confines of that, a lot of people in the military or in a service branch, they go, well, this is my lot. This is where I was assigned, da, 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 da. But he didn't. He realized, I hate these traumatic experiences. I'm not doing that anymore. And he walked into the base commander when he found out that the base cook was leaving. And he walked in the base commander and said, you've got a cook leaving in 2 weeks. I'm the new cook now. And the commander looked at him and said, all right, go see Cookie. And that night, my dad was washing pots and pans. My dad hadn't cooked for a whole base of dudes. He didn't know how to do that, but he did it. He threw himself into it, right? Because he knew he didn't want to do that. He knew that was too much for him, the way he was wired. So he went and found within the constraints of his chosen vocation at that time, he found alternatives. He found new ways. So he became more aware of who he was. And even, see, this is the thing, strength is even a form of vulnerability because you're putting yourself out there. So he got vulnerable. He got clear, authentic, and aware of what he was and what he needed and what his values were. And he went into a base commander, and with strength, he got vulnerable and said, I ain't doing that no more. I'm the new cook. And he learned a whole new skill set, right? He learned a whole new skill set. He knew how to manage budgets. He knew how to do large scale cooking and, with managing portion sizes and all this stuff, right? He learned all of that, and years later, I was raised in a house where it was perfectly normal to have both parents in the kitchen. It was not a division of labor gender thing. We all just cooked, and that was a real blessing to me, right? So dad's own shadow work, right? Dad's own positive shadow work, being clear about who he was, being authentic about who he was, then being vulnerable and honest about who he was, had unforeseeable benefit, right? And so here I am, 48 years later, and I love food and I love making food with people. And it's been critical to kind of who I am and what my thing is and how I connect with people and with a lot of you, right? That all connects back to dad authentically living and knowing who he was, right? It's a thing, y'all. Do you see what I'm picking up? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Do you see this, right? Betsy says, Enneagram 5 wing has me believing that everyone in my life wants to emotionally and mentally eat me out of house and home. Total scarcity mindset regarding my own inner being. How can I be mindful of my own needs and protect my energy without being suspicious of others and defensive in relationship? Why do I believe that my inner self is limited, always on the brink of being depleted? See this? Thank you. Vulnerability, shadow work, right? That's perfect. You have something to chew on all week, right? Or maybe even all life, because that's really the salient question, challenge, life journey, course of study for an Enneagram 5, right? If you're watching this and you're not familiar with Enneagram, you can go find a ton of stuff online. I'm not going to get into it with you. It's a thing. It's been around for a while, and then it's recently become really super popular, especially in evangelical church circles, but it's not from that tradition at all. And it's cool. It's cool stuff. But yeah, you can go find things. If one of y'all watching knows something or has a quick link or whatever, put it in the chat if somebody's interested in learning more. So, what does this mean? Shadow work. What does this mean? That's what Betsy's just saying. What does this mean about me on a deeper level, right? And again, I got to be positive about this, right? The shadow work, right? The shadow work that we're doing, it is about authenticity. It's about vulnerability. It is not about blame. It is not about blaming yourself. It's simply to become more aware of yourself. So you know how to give yourself fully into a moment or to set boundaries in a different kind of moment. When you think about that thing about the friend or partner who doesn't text you back in time, right? Maybe shadow work helps us go, well, maybe instead of getting upset at the lack of response, it invites us to be curious and turn inward and take steps to figure out what the other issues are that need soothing, right? Comfort, right? You look to the shadow to find the lessons, right? Kemi Marie is a spiritual teacher and thinker. She says, you look to the shadow to find the lessons. You look to the shadow to find the lessons. Look to the shadow to see how you can be a better you, right? Right? To grow, to be a deeper you, to be more fully you, right? So we ask, We ask questions like, in that moment, where does this come from? Why is it popping up? Why is it popping up now? All right. What's the lesson here? What do I actually need to work on? What can I do to change this problem? What are things that I can do to change this, right? Here's a big question. How can I support myself? How can I support myself? How can I support myself? Can I tell you that's a question that so often we're not allowed to ask? Like, we're not allowed to ask that question somewhere, especially in religion, especially in church world, man. How can I support myself? That's selfish. You should be thinking about how to support others. And yes, there is some truth of like, if you're really stuck in a rut and you're really down, getting outside of that, we've talked over the last few months too about like wound power, the power we give our wounds. Like, one of the best ways to get out of that is to go serve others, right? But like, so often there's such a denigration of any looking at yourself in church world, right? How can I support myself? Right. How can you support yourself? That is a holy question. That is good and holy work. That's good and holy work. You're looking to the shadow to find the lessons. How can I support myself? When somebody says, hey, what do you need right now? And you go, I don't know. And you find that every time you're in crisis, you never know. When the people who love you are constantly saying, hey, how can I support you? What do you need? There are times where we go, I don't know, because it's so overwhelming in that moment. But if you're finding that every time you're asked, you don't know how to care for yourself and you just go, I don't know. There's something there to dig into, right? There's something in there to dig into. Have you been taught that you're not allowed to support yourself? I don't know. What is it? Right? Do you fundamentally believe that you just don't matter? I don't know. What is it? Right? That's all shadow work. And even when that stuff gets, right? Even when that stuff goes deep, right? That stuff goes deep. It doesn't have to be negative. It's deep. But that doesn't even those deep questions don't have to be heavy, right? Like, it's good deep work, right? Something to surface and talk about. Talk about with your therapist. Talk about with your partner. Talk about with your friends. Put it in the chat. Call me send me a direct message on Facebook Messenger or something. Set up a soul care session. We'll talk about that stuff. I'll sit and listen all day if you want to talk about that. I'll ask those questions and we'll just keep asking questions and we'll just sit with it and pay attention to it, right? Because even when it's heavy, even when it's slow, even when it's plotting, there's also that space to be creative. That's also that feeling of heaviness or the deep work, or like it's going slow and it's slogged through your inner world. That slow, steady work is also, listen, it's making space for creativity. It's making space to really build something. It's making space to have this time and the energy and the perspective and the latitude to really step back and really maybe build something new for yourself, right? I mean, before we had psychology, up until like the 15th century or so, and then shortly it starts to build out of there. But before we had what we call psychology, right? Like when somebody was down and depressed, they call that being in Saturn or being under Saturn. Okay. Back in the Middle Ages, right? And what they would say that because they would, even in Christian Europe in the 15th century, right? It was a metaphor. Why? Because the outermost planet that you could see with your naked eye at that point in the 15th century was Saturn, right? It was this bright star, right? But it seemed to go really slow, right? It was this slow moving, plodding thing, right? It was down. It was dragging, right? And so when people were what we call depressed back then, they'd say they're under Saturn or they're in Saturn. They're feeling a little in Saturn, right? But what's interesting in the mythology is that Saturn was also an architect and a builder. And the planet Saturn is actually really bright. You can see it with your naked eye, which is really amazing, Like if you go out on a clear night somewhere there's not a lot of light pollution, it's amazing to see Saturn, Like that big gas giant with the rings, right? And so we see, even when things are slow and plodding, right? deep and heavy and hard. It's also a dual symbol of creativity and space to think and redesign and learn. And that's what shadow work is. It's the space to like slow down and dig into the deepest self and surface who you really are so that you can build your life, you know? So you can build and strengthen your relationships, so that you can rediscover your dreams, so that maybe you have time to do some demolition work and say, you know what? These tapes that play in my head, I don't need that shit. I don't need that. I don't need that. I need these things. I need these. I need blessing. I need positivity. I need people who are this. I'm going to start doing more of this that gives me life. I'm going to, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? I'm getting some reactions here, right? Mark says, love that, say that. Yes, I said it. I said it. I said it, right? You know, this is what it means in many ways, right? That openness in that space. Watch. That openness in that space is really what it means when we look at the Bible and we see that thing in the Proverbs that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding, and in all your ways follow him and he will make your path straight, right? Or the stuff about like, you know, trust in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart, all that stuff, right? What is a posture? What is trusting in that? What does that mean? What does that mean? And lean not on your, that doesn't mean gaslight yourself or not believe what you see and understand, right? What you clearly see and understand. Too often that gets used for religious authorities to tell you what to think, right? But that's not what it is, right? It's trusting, right? Being open, being vulnerable with yourself, looking at what is below the surface, what is behind. How can I change this? How can I support myself? Why is this coming up for me now, right? That's a posture of trust, to be open and to discover the deeper realities of yourself, right? Lean not on your own understanding. Don't believe that being triggered, sad, controlled is the end for you and is the only option for you, right? 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 In all your ways, lean in, right? In all that you are, be who you are, right? And you'll walk straight. You'll walk a straight path. You'll be fully yourself. You'll walk in the paths you are meant to walk, right? It's like, this is the promise of shadow work. This is the holy, sacred work of shadow work, right? This is what it means. And this is key to the spiritual life. This is key to the spiritual life. And far too often, too many religious communities don't let us have this conversation. I literally had this conversation with a person at the luncheon at my dad's funeral, right? At my dad's funeral, who had left working at a church to go be a social worker. And they were really loving how the impact of that work was, right? And we were talking about how oftentimes that self-awareness work, that digging within work, right, is always done in a negative way. And so people avoid it if they even do it, right? But so often in church world, like, we don't have conversations about this. We don't encourage people to say, this is part of the spiritual journey, right? And then we wonder why everybody's weird with each other and controlling with each other and grumpy with each other. And we wonder why there's all this weird social pressure to act like things are together when they aren't, or to act like God is good when you actually feel like your life is falling apart, right? Like, stop pretending. Why is there so much pressure to not be authentic, right? This is the bad faith, the inauthentic living that the philosopher talks about, right? It's like, because we haven't taught people that this part of the spiritual journey, this is part of the work of the spiritual journey, is to look behind and to look below the surface, and not just at the hard stuff and the bad stuff or the toxic stuff, but even at the good stuff, so that you can really fully know yourself in all the beauty of who you are, and all the beauty of who you are. And to build a life on that foundation, to build a life on the truth of that freedom and that joy and that love. Do you see what I'm saying? I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down today. I didn't plan on talking. I didn't even know how this was going to go. Honestly, this is the first time I've ever done this without really any notes. Like, I just have a couple other things, references that I've used, but like, this is where it is today, y'all. And I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down, you know, like, What's your shadow work? Where do you got to go? How can you support yourself? Where do you need to support yourself today? What's the thing for you? Where does that come from? And why is it popping up? Why is that stuff? Maybe it's the placement of the spoons. It might be the placement of the spoons, or the dirty clothes in the clean clothes, or me and my LaCroix, half-drunk LaCroix cans everywhere, or whatever it is. Surfacey to deep. Pet peeves, like what seems petty can sometimes be a gateway to the most heavy and the most significant, right? Don't miss it. Don't miss it. There could be some good work for me and some good knowledge for me to discover if I really sat down and thought about why half-drunk LaCroix cans tick me off so much. Like nothing's wasted. So everything is an opportunity to go deeper and to know more and to be more truly oneself as God dreams, right? And to be vulnerable and open and honest and real about it and to live that unapologetically, right? Betsy says this, and I think this is a great way to wrap up. The blessing of self-knowledge is that you are formed in the image of God, a divine expression of self-iness. Self-knowledge can grow into a deeper knowledge of God. Yes, this is one of the deepest axioms of the Christian spiritual tradition, is that knowledge of self and knowledge of God are so deeply intertwined, and they inform one another, and they inform one another, they form one another, they support one another, right? Knowledge of God gives knowledge of self points to knowledge of God. Yes, yes, yes. So let's end with that. Self-knowledge can grow into a deeper knowledge of God. Self-knowledge is a gateway to deeper knowledge and connection with the divine. Yeah, that's a good word for today. So say that. All right, y'all. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Spiritual Direction, Soul Care, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being with us, either on the broadcast or the replay. If you're watching on the replay, again, make sure that you put some comments in. Let us know what you're thinking and how this is impacting you. As always, go back. You can always go over to spiritualdirectionandsoulcare.com and learn about our soul care program. You can donate there. We're still in process again. Like we've been in process with some stuff there. We need to do some updating there, but it's a great portal gateway to learn more as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, come on over and join us at the Facebook group. There's always some really good stuff going on over there. It is good, y'all. Next week is what? Next week is August 29th. So we'll see you next week for Sunday Live, August 29th. And then we will not have Sunday Live on September 5th, the holiday weekend, September 5th. And then on September 12th, we will start Thriving in Uncertainty. We'll be looking at 7 strategies of how to thrive in uncertainty. It's going to be awesome, 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 awesome. Did I tell you it's going to be awesome? It's going to be a great, great journey through thriving in uncertainty. I can't wait because you know me, I love insanely practical spiritual tools. So this is going to get pretty nuts and bolts. These 7 things each week, 1 a week is going to be great. So I can't wait to do it. September 12th, it's going to be good times. Also, there's other stuff coming up. We'll be talking about it as the days go by this next week. Oh yeah, September 1st, we're going to start midweek meditation. That'll be Wednesday nights on Zoom. And we'll be doing some guided meditation time. It'll be a time to give ourselves a more focused time of stillness and breathing and rest and refocus. These meditations will be guided times of prayer and healing. So come through. You can learn more on the Facebook page at the events. On the events section, you'll see midweek meditation launches September 1st. That'll be every other week. On Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on Zoom. I cannot wait to finally get that started. We've been talking about starting it for a while, and that is going. So come and join us. Invite a friend. It is open to anyone. We're going to have a great, great time. I love you guys. Spiritual Direction, Soul Care. You guys are awesome. It was great. Do that shadow work. Be the you that God intended for you to be. And I cannot wait to see you guys next week. See you later.